بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين أما بعد. If there's nobody behind you, then you can come forward. Please come forward and let's see you, man. Umar, you might as well bring your chair forward. I think if you remember, right in the very first lesson, we discussed the etiquette of seeking knowledge. One of the things that we find, which the Sahaba, they always, in Arabic we call it a talib, somebody who's a seeker, somebody who looks like they want something. Not somebody who's turned up by accident. Sometimes you look at some people, it looks like they've accidentally just here and then in their own world, thinking about their own things, half asleep. So there's some things which aid to that. So if somebody leans against the wall, they're a lot more likely to go to sleep. If somebody looks at the floor, they're a lot more likely to go to sleep. If somebody keeps eye contact with me the whole time, then it's a lot less likely that they go to sleep, even if they're leaning against the wall. Alhamdulillah, we have many of our elders here, as we can see, who cannot, sit away from the wall. But as long as we keep eye contact, we try and stay awake and we try and stay focused, inshallah. This is something which will benefit us. Last week, we didn't have a lesson. 2 weeks ago, when we had our lesson, we were looking at the very, very first Muslims. So we looked at the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So Khadija radiallahu anh, Ali radiallahu anh, Zayd bin Haritha, these three members of the household of the Prophet ﷺ, they became Muslim. All of them amazing in their own right. Khadija radiallahu anh, fundamental, keeping the Prophet ﷺ, giving him all the support he needed at that time. Then Ali radiallahu anh was still a child, but what we find from Zayd bin Haritha, he also supported the Prophet ﷺ. And then we also mentioned that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was the first man to become a Muslim. We'll touch more on this, who is the first and who is second. Last week we decided that the scholars have agreed that many of them say Khadija was the first one, or that Abu Bakr was the first one, or that Ali was the first one. They say that all of these were the first one. So the way we understood this last week was that Ali was the first child, Khadija was the first female, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was the first man, and Zayd bin Haritha was the first slave who was freed. So this is how we understood it last week. Moving on, there's many things that we covered as well last week. We spoke about the difference between Rasul and Nabi, which we all got very interested about. We spoke about different things. But moving on, this Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, and trying to understand the way the foundation of Islam was established. So if we're going to study Seerah, our aim is to, from the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, all the way till when he passes away, he's establishing this thing called Islam. Islam's being established over these 23 years. So how is it established and who forms the foundations of Islam? And if we're still here in year 1 or year 2 and year 3, we're looking at the foundations of Islam. These people are never ever underrated. So we look at these people that we start off with. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, we know, after all of the Anbiya, he's known as the best human being to come on the face of the earth. Because he had so much, he gave support to the Prophet ﷺ, and always we find the Prophet ﷺ referring to him. So many different things we find about him. The Quran talks about him being second with him in the cave with the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ mentions, if I was to have a friend, I would take Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. Prophet ﷺ says, I've repaid everybody's favors to me, except Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. I can't repay his favor. He's done so many favors to me. And we see right at the beginning of Islam, how many favors he done for Islam, how much he helped Islam. But that's not something we want to worry about too much. What we want to focus on today is who he converted to Islam. He brought 5 people, and these 5 people also helped become the foundation of Islam. Right at the very beginning, he brought these 5 people into Islam. So the names Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, Uthman bin Affan, Zubayr bin Awam, Abdurrahman bin Auf, and the last one, Talha bin Ubaidullah. These are the 5 people. So try and learn these names, appreciate their names, and understand how much of an influence these people had. One thing just to briefly understand is the Ashara Mubashara as well. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he promises 10 Sahaba Jannah. In one sitting, he tells that this person is worthy of Jannah, this person is worthy of Jannah, this person is worthy of Jannah. And he says it about 10 Sahaba. And these Sahaba now have an elite status in the eyes of many people. What kind of Sahaba these were? So these people that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh converted to Islam, very often will hear this honor given to them, that he is from one of the Asharatul Mubashara. He was given the glad tidings of Jannah. So when I say that, when we have this glad tiding for this person, we realize the honor it is. From the 100,000 Sahaba that we know about, that we know existed, about 100, some say more, 100, some say 1.25 lakh, the 125,000. But 100,000 Sahaba, 10 of them were given this honor in one sitting. So it's a great honor that they were given in this time. So starting off with Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. Now he was the third or fourth person to embrace Islam. So the books then say he is the fourth of the fourth people. So there were four people who were Muslims, and he was the fourth person who then became the Muslim at that time. So when he embraced Islam, his mother really didn't like him becoming a Muslim. So his mother used emotional blackmail. This is the main thing that she used. She said that I'm not going to eat and I'm not going to drink, I'm going to die, because unless you give up your faith. He said, give up your faith. She started this. She said, I'm on hunger strike until you give up your faith. So Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas said, no, I'm not going to give up my faith. Then she carried on her hunger strike for many days. To the extent that the narrations say, she became weak. She became unable to do many things. She became that weak. So now she's still blackmailing Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas then he saw this. He saw her becoming weak. Obviously affected his heart as his mother. So he became upset, but he said that even if you were to be given 1,000 lives, if I was to have 1,000 mothers like you, I would not give them preference over the Prophet ﷺ. I would not be able to give them preference. I would not be able to give up this religion of the Prophet ﷺ. And then when she saw his determination, when he said things like this, then eventually she ended up eating, and she took back her hunger strike. So this is how Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas had to deal with this kind of emotional, something which can really hurt a person when somebody sees their own mother starting to suffer in this kind of way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also revealed the Quran ayah, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكْ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ. In this verse in the Quran it came down, where Allah He speaks about the value of the mother, that the parents, the value of the parents, and then the mother, that the mother picks up the womb, that in the womb she has the baby for so many months. And then He says that you should, obviously Allah speaks about how important it is to do ihsan to the parents, to be good with the parents. However, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ, if they force you to do shirk, to ascribe partners to Allah, then فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا, you do not have to obey them. This is all Allah says. That if they force you to do shirk, then you don't have to obey the parents. And then Allah carries on after this, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. And this is what you find from Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. He stayed well with them. He didn't give up on them. He kept very close with her. He kept love for her. He didn't lament her, he didn't shout at her, he didn't abuse her, he didn't get angry with her. So to keep good relations with parents. However, if they tell you to do something wrong, you can't do this. So this is something fundamental. In our culture, we may have things which are wrong, which are just anti-Islamic, which have nothing to do with Islam. And our parents may sometimes force these on us. So sometimes we have to explain this, we have to avoid them, we have to stay away from them. So there's different things. And now again, the parents have the highest status in Islam. As in, from the people that are alive, nobody can take a higher status than a mother. Then nobody can take a higher status than a father. We find this hadith, this is an accepted fact. But sometimes we find that some people, they have more respect for the imam than their fathers. Or they have more respect for the imam than their mothers. Which is very bad. They go home and they talk to their mother like as a daughter or something. And so the respect for a mother and father has to always be there. Then after that comes your shaykh, after that comes your ustad and your imam and the scholars and other people of the community. They all come afterwards. But number one is the parents. They always come first. Sometimes we conflate it. We don't realize how important, how much value Islam gives actually to parents. When this very famous hadith that the Prophet ﷺ came, the person came to the Prophet ﷺ and said that, who is ahaqqu bi husni sahabati, who is most worthy of my good companionship, who should I be best to? And she said mother, 3 times he said mother, and then he said father. So the parents' value is always at the top. And this is not just taking one isolated narration, looking at the Quran, looking at all of the hadith. The general rule of Islam is that number one is the parents, then afterwards is anybody else. So the respect has to always be there. But even then we find that the Quran itself also says that if they tell you to do something wrong, then you don't have to obey them in that regard. So we have to understand Islam for ourselves and realize what's right and wrong, and make sure, even in this case of Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, where the mother emotionally blackmailed him to try and get him to leave Islam, even then the Quran says that you still have to be ma'roof with them. You have to be good with them. You have to treat them with dignity and respect. So this is what we find about the Quran and how it emphasizes the value of parents, and also here with Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. So many lessons we take from here. The next point we find, he's the first person to spill blood. Once the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, at the beginning time, they used to go and they used to pray far away from Makkah. They didn't used to pray in the Haram, right around the house of Allah. They used to go away, sometimes in the mountains, sometimes behind some of the hills of Makkah. They used to go there and pray. So they used to try and hide basically from the polytheists. They didn't want the Quraysh to come and abuse them. So if they were praying openly, then everybody would come and abuse them. So they would hide and try and do it secretly. Now, once they were in this place, and Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was there, Prophet ﷺ was there, they were praying salah. And the Quraysh came and they started abusing these group of people. They're praying, they're trying to pray, and they've come away from the mainstream. They've tried to hide in this place, and the Quraysh come and start abusing these people. And they started coming close, and physically they ended up exchanging blows. So then here we find that Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, he was the first person to spill blood in the name of Islam. That he had to defend the group there, and to show that you can't just mess around with us like this, to defend them, and to show, because otherwise the oppression would have escalated. They would have abused the Muslims more. To show them that they had to stop, he was the first person to spill blood for the sake of Islam. This is one of his honors which he has, that when they were worshipping, he came and stopped them. And one of the greatest achievements, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. Now, the reason we're going into this detail now, we're thinking we're in the first year of Seerah, and we're mentioning the Battle of Uhud, which is so many years down the line. The reason I'm just mentioning a couple of extra points with each Sahaba is because I want to try and internalize the Sahaba as well, to an extent. It's very rare to find a Sahaba, we'll come to this later, but it's very rare to find a Sahabi whose whole life is encapsulated, is covered by the books, or is actually recorded. Remember, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands. But to actually have a Sahabi whose life from the day he was born to the day he passed away, to the time he was a Muslim, how he became Muslim, to have it all recorded is very, very rare. So now, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, how many more times in our life are we going to have a session, are we going to have even 2 or 3 minutes thinking about this Sahabi? I mean, if you think about it, probably never again. We can't really imagine when he'll come up again. You know, he's not one of the khulafa. He's not somebody who we need to know so much about. We're not going to talk about him too much on a Friday. So we have this one opportunity, so we try and learn as much as we can to at least have enough to recall when we hear Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, oh, he was the person who, his mother, he went on hunger strike. His mother went on a hunger strike. He was the person who had to spill blood when the Muslims were attacked when they were praying. He was the person who done this and this. So we have this kind of profile of Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. It helps us internalize him. So there's a couple of points. This point here is that in the Battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ described him as the best archer. As we know, in Uhud, it's well known that many of the Muslims, they fled the battlefield. So they didn't stay with the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ, he was in extreme difficulty and he was alone. There was very few Sahaba with him. And then one of the things about the Battle of Uhud is known about Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, that he was the archer at that time. And he was, in fact, the Prophet ﷺ, in the narration, he was picking up the arrows for him and giving them to him. And then he was saying, Irmi ya Sa'd, irmi, hit, strike. Fidaka abi wa ummi, may my mother and my father be sacrificed for you. This is the dua he made for Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. He described him as the best archer at that time. So in Uhud he really stood out. He was known to be the best on the day of Uhud. Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, there's so much we can say about his life. Now we know about this specific Sahabi because when we look at the value which he had, even after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So he was the great famous Battle of Qadisiyah. It was led by Sa'd radiallahu anhu. If you don't know what that is, inshallah we'll have another course on the history of Islam. It doesn't come in Seerah, the Battle of Qadisiyah. But if we look at in our history, to be Muslims today, and where that battle took place, how much the Muslims conquered, you know, it was 30,000 and there was Muslims, and in one day like 8,000 of the Persians were killed, 2,000 of the Muslims were killed in one day. It was a massive battle which took place. And the main pioneer behind that was Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu. So after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was really trusted by Umar radiallahu anhu, really trusted him. So 2 years, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was there. When he passed away, Umar radiallahu anhu, he used to put Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas on the front line, and he used to always make him lead the enemy.
Did Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas also lead the campaign for Jerusalem?
Yeah, he was also involved in that as well. Yeah.
He was leading the campaign?
He was leading the campaign. There's a difference of opinion, because obviously we have Umar radiallahu anhu as well. who went there and actually kind of got the keys. He did join later on, yeah. Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was there. The thing is, when you have Jerusalem is a massive expedition. So to say that from beginning to end he was in charge might be Torah Sabaid. To say that when they got to Jerusalem he was in charge. That's one thing we can say. Maybe on the journey there was different people who were in charge and emirs. But generally that is the known fact that he was in charge of that. There's many other things. Brothers, we may know more about Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. But just for now, to keep in our mind for future reference, well, at least I know this much. These are the cream of the crop. If there was hundreds of thousands of them, and we're going to talk about 5 of them today, then at least we should at least know about 5. We should know about the Prophet himself, his wife, his Zayd bin Haritha, Ali radiallahu anh, and then at least a few. How many Sahaba do we know about? We should ask ourselves that question. What do we know about how many Sahaba? So even if it's just 5 today we learn, and we try and have some profile for them and keep it in mind, inshallah. The next one we do talk about in Jummah Bayans. Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. He doesn't need an introduction, he doesn't need to be spoken about too much, because alhamdulillah we all know that he's the 4th Khalifa. He was the 3rd Khalifa of Islam. So after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, after the Prophet stopped ruling, then he was Abu Bakr, then he was Umar radiallahu anh, and then it was Uthman radiallahu anh. He took the reins, and he was eventually he was killed by the rebels, and he had a lot of things. But one of the first things we're trying to talk about, the beginning of Islam, in the first year, when these people converted to Islam. So when Uthman radiallahu anh, when he converted to Islam, he had, again, if we look at the tribe which he was in, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was from Banu Hashim. So this was the opposite tribe. This was almost an enemy of the tribe of Uthman radiallahu anh. So Uthman's tribe, they didn't like it. So when Uthman became Muslim, he's almost joined the enemy. So his father was already dead, but his uncle took it upon himself to torture him. So he tied his hands, he tied his legs, and he locked him in a wardrobe. And he kept him like this for a long time. Uthman radiallahu anh, growing up, he was known as like the golden boy of his clan. Everyone loved him. He was extremely intelligent, really soft, shy, modest, and everybody would like him. Everybody really had a lot of love for Uthman radiallahu anh. But when he became Muslim, people turned against him like this, and people tried to abuse him. But because of his respect, eventually he was released. The most important thing to realize, even in the first year, due to his influence, he was immediately almost in the inner circle of the Prophet ﷺ. We're trying to picture the team which the Prophet ﷺ had around him. So we'd have the Prophet ﷺ himself, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, and Uthman radiallahu anh was in that team, along with Zayd bin Haritha as well, and along with these great Sahaba. This was the team which was forming around the Prophet ﷺ. So other things about him is his uncle's name was Hakam bin Al-As, who locked him up. Also his wives didn't become Muslim, so he ended up divorcing his wives because they were just not happy with him being Muslim. And we know that this was difficult for him, but then he had the honor of marrying the first daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, and then when she passed away, he also married the second daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. So he married the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ until they passed away, and then the next one as well, he married her, and then she also passed away. So he had such a great honor. When he lost his wife, who wasn't a Muslim, he had the honor of having the Muslim as his the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is the great achievements of Uthman radiallahu anh. Again, we don't need to go into too much detail. Many of us are aware of Uthman radiallahu anh. The next one, Zubair bin Awam. Again, many of us may have heard his name as one of the amazing people, but if I said, tell me something about him, we'd probably all struggle. So again, just something about Zubair bin Awam, just to be able to appreciate who he is. Remember, this list of 5 people is who Abu Bakr radiallahu anh converted at the beginning. So we're still in year 1 of Islam. Prophet ﷺ came, told Abu Bakr next day, he went and started giving da'wah. These are the influential people he converted. Zubair bin Awam, he was related to the Prophet ﷺ. So from the Prophet's mother's side, he was the nephew of Khadija radiallahu anh. And from the Prophet's father's side, from the Prophet ﷺ himself, so he actually became the first cousin of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So he was very, very closely related to the Prophet ﷺ, Zubair bin Awam. And he was extremely strong. He used to defend Islam very, very vehemently. Once in the Kaaba, the leaders of the Quraysh were all sitting there, and suddenly a young man ran in, and he was shouting. He was saying that my dad's been hurt, my dad's arm has broken. He was very worried. So then the leaders of the Quraysh were like, how come? They said Zubair broke his arm. Zubair bin Awam broke his arm. He injured him. So they said, okay, why would he do that? He's such a calm person. Why would he randomly start attacking somebody? And then they said that the father of this person who had come, he was trying to insult the Prophet ﷺ. He's trying to insult Islam. He was asked about who is this Prophet, and he said that this person is come and he's causing trouble and he's making things up. So when he said this, Zubair radiallahu anh got very angry, and he said that this is not something you can say to him. So he took it upon himself to defend Islam, to defend the honor of the Prophet ﷺ. And he asked him to take it back, and he didn't take it back. Even as a young boy, once somebody tried to pick on him. So they thought, this is a little kid, let me pick on this person. So they picked on him. As a man who was picking on a little boy at that age he was 12 or 13. And when they picked on him, he managed to overthrow the man. He managed to get the man on the floor. He managed to win the fight between the man. So he was extremely strong, even as a very, very young person. He was the fourth or fifth person to convert. We'll talk about these fourth and fifth. We said, last week we were saying that Ali radiallahu anhu was the fourth one, or Zayd bin Haritha was the fourth one. Now we're saying this week, we said that Sa'ad was the third or fourth, and now we're saying Zubair is the fourth or fifth. So everybody's probably a little bit confused. We'll touch on that later. Why does all this happen? But just the last point, he swam in the river Nile to give solace to the Muslims when he migrated to Abyssinia, near Egypt. So when he got there, then there were rumors spread that, as we know, when the Muslims, they got permission to go to Abyssinia, they had the king who was on their side, who was happy to support them. Rumors spread that there was a rebellion and they were trying to overthrow the king. So now the Muslims are very worried. Imagine if the king is killed and a new king comes who doesn't like Muslims. The king was an amazing person, everybody loved him. So imagine if he was killed. So when the new king came, they were very worried that this might happen. So now, in order to check whether the fight is going on, they were on the wrong side of the river. So Zubair bin Awam, he took it upon himself to give everyone peace, to go and check what's happening in the war. So to see whether or not the rebels have won or not, he swam down the river Nile. He checked the condition. While swimming, he checked the war, how it's going on, and then he realized that the rebels have lost. So the army of the king have managed to curb the attack which was happening, and they won. So then he came back, he swam back to the Muslims and told the Muslims. So just to tell the Muslims and keep the Muslims happy and safe, he swam down the river Nile. This is one very amazing thing which he did. So to check and keep the Muslims happy, this is something which he did. So Zubair bin Awam, this is the third Sahabi of the Prophet ﷺ, which Abu Bakr radiallahu anh managed to convert to Islam. So inshallah what we'll do is we'll have our questions. So 3 questions. Recap briefly the life and the achievements of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh firstly. So there's some Quran verse, there's also things which we do, the Prophet ﷺ's hadith as well. The second question, the 5 people who Abu Bakr converted, try and say them by memory. And the last one is to give an overview of the first 3. So Sa'ad, Uthman and Zubair, try and give some brief overview inshallah, in twos inshallah, or make teams. You'll make 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s inshallah. However you want to, just quickly try and work your way through the question. This is obviously to get everyone to wake up a little bit and just refresh the brief amount that we've done inshallah. So just in 3 minutes inshallah, if everyone can quickly get through the 3 questions inshallah, and then we'll go through them. Abdul Haq.
Sorry. Abu
I've read this one myself, the one I mentioned. Yeah, I think there's both narrations probably there. Yeah, I think so.